With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yulana Weeks.
Our top stories.
St. Kitts Nevis national security officials emphasize that youth voice is critical to shaping policies to address delinquent behaviors. CRFM delegation pleased with the efforts made to enhance St. Kitts and Nevis's marine sector.
ECCB economist Kevin Woods discusses effects of inflation on region. Guyana sends protest letter to Venezuela on military incursion. Legal battle over St. Lucia's citizenship by investment program. Internationally, U.S. and Israel reject Arab alternative to Donald Trump's Gaza plan. Now, the details.
Eartha Carey, coordinator of the Citizen Security Secretariat, said the findings of the 90-day campaign highlighted the importance of the youth voice in decision-making. According to Carey, the youth played a fundamental role in the 90-day campaign as they brought critical issues to the fore that were overlooked by authorities for years.
Some of the things that were overlooked is that, and these came from the voices of the communities, including the youths. Let's not leave them out, including the youths. We had an engagement in one community, and some of the youths were saying that they know that there are issues that are in their household, and the parents did not know or do not want to take the approach to do stuff like counseling, right? So when we look at
counseling for the children
parents,
or the parents themselves,
yes,
okay.
the parents, and when that was mentioned by a youth, I mean, we had to really take a step back and be like, okay, wow. So the children, for us, the team, it told us that the children are definitely paying attention to what's going on, and that is why, with the findings also, some of them revealed that's one of the reasons why they also turn to the gangs, so to speak. They turn to the gangs for support, they turn to the gangs for an ear, they turn to the gangs to render support or safety, as they may put it, because they felt safe with the gang peers, so to speak.
Sergeant Charmaine Ordain, head of the National Intervention Team, shared the sentiment of the host of In Focus, Ian Richards, that today's youth are more inclined to express themselves and are more alert about troubling matters within their households.
Just this week I had that similar impact where I had a meeting on Monday, a very long meeting at a high school, and one of the youths waited on the outside for me, and he expressed himself respectfully and identified that the family needs help because this is why he's getting towards certain behavior in school. And I felt good to see that, this young man, a teen, I think he was about 15 years old, can reach out to the police and say, I've identified my family needs help.
Drug use, poverty, social media influence, and lack of religious upbringing were identified as some key factors driving delinquent behaviors. According to Ordain, children as young as 10 are smoking marijuana, and some teens are also engaging in vaping.
And there has been an increase over the past 2 to 3 years when it comes to involvement of youths with drug abuse.
What age are we looking at?
We're looking as young as 10 years old. The small amount between 10 to 12 is a small amount, but from 12 in the high school age group, it's ridiculous. And you often wonder why this is happening, why they're geared towards, and we have to look at vaping as well. Just last week or week before, I was passing a particular area, and one young man actually had 2 vapors in his mouth, in his uniform. And it is alarming when it comes to the drug abuse among our youths. And this is one thing that we have to try to see how best we can diffuse as soon as possible.
Ms. Carey said authorities and the schools through the Ministry of Education will utilize some existing resources and programs to combat the delinquencies within the communities. Representatives of the Belize-based organization Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, CRFM, visited the Federation to promote the OECS Biospace project funded by the European Union. The delegation consisted of Mr. Peter A. Murray and Ms. June Masters. Following their visit to St. Kitts, the 2 officials traveled to Nevis on February 27, where they were engaged in discussions with officials from the Department of Marine Resources, the Department of Physical Planning and Environment, and the Marine Resources Minister, and also visited various fish landing sites across the island. The discussion points included enhancing data collection and standardizing the operations at fish landing sites as part of their quest to enhance coastal management, Mr. Peter Murray explained.
We are hoping that we can look at how we can enhance coastal management in the Federation. especially in terms of the fisheries sector. One of the things we found is that there's a need to be able to determine whether we're doing things right and how we're doing things, how we can improve. So among the things we're looking at is the collection of data that can support sustainable management of the resources. We're also looking at other factors that deal with management measures and that sort of thing, in the hope that coming out of the work of the OECS Biospace Project, we can support the increased, improved management of the living marine resources of the Federation, which will redound, of course, to the benefit of the population, both economically and in terms of food security.
Murray, speaking on behalf of his counterpart, expressed a content with the work being done within the Federation's fisheries sector. He confirmed that the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism's continued support to the marine sector in the Federation.
I think St. Kitts and Nevis can be a beacon in terms of what is happening here. There are things that we found that is being done right. And so we think that, if we can provide any support to assist with that, we're willing to do that. I quite honestly, I think St. Kitts and Nevis is doing so well that we're helping with tweaking. We're not really doing anything new. We're just helping with tweaking what's already been done so well. I'll say on my behalf, I say kudos to what has been going on in the Federation, most definitely. But we are here, and it's been a pleasure.
The delegation's visit to the Federation follows the 14th special meeting of the Ministerial Council of the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines from October 7 to 11, 2024. The ministers committed to improving climate-smart blue economic growth from the marine resources and addressing the state of fisheries and aquaculture in the Caribbean by expanding production across the 17 member states to improve food security and jobs. Nevis's Fisheries Minister Eric Evelyn said that progress has been made within the island's fisheries sector, particularly in biodiversity management and sustainable practices. Evelyn emphasized his commitment to working with regional partners for the further advancement of the island's marine sector.
Of course, we know that we are very big here on food security and food sovereignty, and a part of that is what we do in the fisheries subsector. We have been very active in the fisheries subsector. We have been doing a lot of things in terms of biodiversity management, in terms of sustainability as well. And so we are happy that any assistance we can get from the CRFM, from the European Union, and any other overseas organizations, we are always delighted to accept that assistance. And so whatever this project will be offering to us in terms of sustainable coastal management, in terms of our resilience to climate change, what we're doing with our fisheries, what we're doing with our lobster and our conch, we certainly welcome that. Minister
Evelyn showered praises upon the fishermen and officials working in the marine sector for their efforts in improving resilience and productivity.
In a recent episode of ECCB Connects, Kevin Woods, a noted economist from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's ECCB's Research, Statistics and Data Analytics Department, discussed inflation, a phenomenon impacting individuals across the region. The discussion provided insights into inflation's causes, measurements, and effects, with perspectives gathered from residents of ECCB member countries. Across the region, people describe what they consider to be inflation.
For me, inflation will increase in cost of living within a country over a given period of time.
They increase a little than before, because before you could have used amount of money and get a lot of goods, but now you can't do that.
1 week, and I think one price, and next week it's a higher price.
What I've noticed is a general increase in price for the same good. So for example, if we have a bread that costs $5, now it's costing $10 or $11, depends on the store that you go to.
Well, definitely seen an increase in the prices of everyday items. Things like fruits, vegetables, even basic staples like bread and milk have gone up. And also it's harder for me to find discount on items I typically buy. So these price hikes, it makes it more challenging.
Those increases in prices are as a result of inflation, which is triggered by a number of factors. Some of those contributing factors are the war in Ukraine, the unrest in the Middle East, and if we can go back a little bit, COVID-19 pandemic.
From a layman's point of view, I think inflation has to do with the hike in prices or the rise in prices that doesn't necessarily match with the spending power of individuals.
During the program, Kevin Woods defined inflation as
sustained increase in the price level over a given period of time,
commonly measured using a consumer price index, CPI. CPI tracks the price changes in a representative basket of goods and services typically consumed by households.
Inflation really refers to increases in the price of a basket of goods, or it could also refer to increases in the cost of producing items. But generally, it is measured by using what is called a consumer price index, which essentially is a basket of goods which is selected, which is supposed to be an average representation of the consumption of consumers in an economy. And this basket of goods is based on a particular year, which is referenced. And what happens is that the enumerators are the persons who collect the data. They will look at how the prices in this basket of goods changes over, say, a period of 1 year. And the difference between the prices of these goods 1 year later compared to the base period is what you refer to as the rate of inflation, or the rate of increase in consumer prices.
He elaborated that speculation surrounding future price hikes, as well as behaviors like wage increases and preemptive pricing adjustments, can also contribute to sustained inflation. Woods emphasized that inflation erodes purchasing power, reducing the quality of goods and services individuals can afford with the same income.
Essentially, what you will see is an increase in prices in the supermarket. In the case of food, you would see increases in the prices of gasoline at the pump. These are probably the most prominent items that we see. And in addition, you will also see increases in prices for other consumer goods. So sometimes what is done is that these items are taken out and they look at what is called core inflation. So if you take out food and you take out fuel and also other items that the government may set prices on, if you take those out, you look at what is the core inflation rate. Now, these components will increase in price, will have price increases depending on developments. What the average consumer is going to realize is that perhaps their wages or salaries have remained constant, but the prices of these items is increasing. So this is how it impacts the average consumer. It reduces the ability to purchase more goods and services at the prevailing prices of those goods. But generally speaking, inflation results in a reduction in people's spending power.
Woods concluded by reiterating that inflation's impact is deeply felt in stagnant wage environments, further straining households' ability to maintain their standard of living. Woods underscored inflation's ripple effect throughout the region, tying it to global influences like the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ukraine war, and geopolitical unrest in the Middle East. Understanding inflation empowers individuals to better navigate its challenges, though economic solutions remain a collective effort. In regional news, Guyana sends protest letter to Venezuela on military incursion, Guyana News source reports.
The government of Guyana has formally dispatched a letter of protest to the government of Venezuela following the incursion by the Venezuelan Coast Guard in Guyana's waters last Saturday. In the letter, the government said it reminded Venezuela that all the activities which the government of Guyana has authorized to be undertaken in its exclusive economic zone are entirely within the maritime areas pertinent to the sovereign coastal territory of Guyana, as defined by the arbitral award of 1899, which established the frontier between British Guyana and Venezuela. Further, it said, consistent with well-established principles of international law in respect of the maritime area, Guyana enjoys sovereignty up to 12 nautical miles in the territorial sea and sovereign rights beyond 12 nautical miles in the exclusive economic zone and the continental shelf. The Guyana government said the latest action by Caracas has done nothing but pose a threat to the peace, good order, and security of the sovereign territory of Guyana, and the stability of Latin America and the Caribbean. The government of Guyana made it clear that Guyana views the maneuver by Venezuela as highly provocative, and is concerned by the persistence of the government of Venezuela in encroaching on Guyana's land and maritime space territory. The government said it also reminded the government of Venezuela of its international obligations under general international law, the UN Charter, and the order issued by the International Court of Justice on the 1st of December 2023. That order stated that pending a final decision in the case, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela shall refrain from taking any action which would modify the situation that currently prevails in the territory in dispute, whereby Guyana administers and exercises control over the area. Additionally, the order stated that both parties shall refrain from any action which might aggravate or extend the dispute before the court or make it more difficult to resolve. The Guyana government said as the only state entitled to administer and exercise control over the Essequibo region, Guyana enjoys the right to administer and exercise control over the adjacent maritime areas. It noted that the aggressive behavior by Venezuela's naval warship last Saturday violates the court's prohibition on engaging in any action which might aggravate or extend the dispute. The Guyana government said it is concerned that the latest actions by Venezuela represents an escalation of the tensions that Venezuela has created, by first publicly announcing that it will hold election in Guyana's sovereign territory for a governor of Guyana's Essequibo region in May. According to the government, such hostile acts are inconsistent with the obligation of the parties to respect each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence, and to resolve disputes by peaceful means, and thus can only be viewed as a threat to the peace, security, and stability of the Latin America and Caribbean region. The Guianan government also noted that in recent times, Venezuela has resorted to a series of aggressive actions in the Guyana-Venezuela border region. The statement from the government of Guyana said it has always employed a diplomacy of peace and abided by the principles of the UN Charter and the rule of international law, and will not, however, countenance the annexation, seizure, or occupation of any part of Guyana's sovereign territory or threat thereof, nor will Guyana accept any threats to Guyana's licensees operating lawfully in the waters adjacent to the Essequibo region. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs said Guyana will continue to update the international community on developments in the matter.
Legal battle over St. Lucia's Citizenship by Investment Program, DBS St. Lucia, has the details.
In the coming weeks, the government is expected to present arguments in the CIP judicial review case. The case filed by the opposition leader Alan Chasney claims irregularities in the program's infrastructure option and names Investment Minister Dr. Ernest Hilaire and the CIP board as defendants. The first hearing of the case took place on Monday.
The defense was given up until, I think, at the end of March to reply to our affidavits. And so they would have to provide the evidence to counter their defense. We would have an opportunity for getting any additional information that we require, and that there would be a case hearing in the middle of May.
Of much public interest and concern is whether the court will grant an injunction to suspend the infrastructure option until the outcome of the case.
We've always said that the injunction needs to be form part of the substantive case. And we believe that it's absolutely necessary as to why that injunction should be applied. Now, it would be for them to indicate why they don't think to tell the judge. We've not heard that as yet. So that will be coming up in the next couple of weeks.
The investment minister has repeatedly denied any irregularities with the country's CIP. During last week's sitting of Parliament, he said the government will vigorously defend itself against illegal action, which he says poses a threat to the country's reputation and economic progress.
He continues this relentless effort to retard our government's successes. He is proving to us that he would do anything, no matter how reckless or destructive, to sabotage St. Lucia's progress. His latest attempt to block Galaxy's CIP applications and stop the infrastructure option is nothing more than a desperate, selfish political stunt which he has fashioned to hurt the very people he proclaims to care about.
The investment minister highlighted that this case's outcome affects several projects, including the Canals Resort project, the construction of a new wing at the Owenking EU Hospital, and upgrades to road infrastructure. For the DBS News World, Zane Romulus reported.
We now bring you these international reports.
We made mention of the peace plan in the Middle East that the Arab leaders were discussing yesterday. They're seeking international support for their Gaza reconstruction plan. The plan comes with a 91-page glossary that proposes an enormous rebuilding operation with, crucially, the Palestinians remaining in place. It will be costly. The bill is estimated at over $50 billion. There are detailed proposals in there on how to clear all the rubble. The Israelis and the Americans, though, have already dismissed it as unworkable. There's no plan, they say, for disarming Hamas. They've rejected the proposals to restore and revamp the Palestinian Authority. The more immediate issue, of course, is where we go from here in terms of the ceasefire. Israel's still withholding all humanitarian aid for Gaza, and it's now resisting, it seems, the terms agreed for phase 2 of the agreement. So let's bring in Yolande Nell, who is in Jerusalem. Good to see you, Yolande. The Israeli Prime Minister said this morning, in conversation with his new army chief, that he is determined to achieve victory. That doesn't sound like there's much appetite to engage with the Arab League.
So far, what we've had from Israel in terms of a response to that unified Arab statement about a Gaza reconstruction plan, really it's saying that this is rooted in outdated perspectives, that it ignores the realities on the ground, and Israel has been standing by President Trump's alternative plan, which envisages the 2 million residents of Gaza being moved away and a sort of beach destination being created there instead. What we had earlier when Mr. Netanyahu was speaking, it was at the handover ceremony for the new Israeli military chief of staff. The former Israeli military chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, tendered his resignation earlier this year, really because of what the Israeli military itself has found to be its complete failure to prevent the events of the 7th of October, those deadly Hamas-led attacks. And we had both Mr. Netanyahu and his new chief of staff for the military talking about the need to have full victory over Hamas.
Obviously, at the root of all this is how to disarm Hamas and what sort of authority and security to put in place, Yolande. There was discussion yesterday of this plan to send international peacekeepers under the UN umbrella. Who would provide those troops and what sort of access would they be given in Gaza?
I mean, that is something that the UN Security Council is being asked for as part of this plan without sort of more details being provided. It's previously been suggested that there would be Arab troops that could go into Gaza and that you would then have a handover as swiftly as possible to a new Palestinian police force with both Egypt and Jordan involved in training up those police officers. But this security issue is really the big one that remains unanswered. I mean, Hamas was not referred to by name in the communiques that came out of that Cairo summit. Hamas, though, has welcomed the final statements that came out from this meeting of the Arab League. It has shown a willingness to cede power. The idea as part of this plan would be that you would have a temporary takeover of Gaza by a committee of independent experts that could oversee the reconstruction, the distribution of humanitarian aid. But ultimately, there would be a takeover by a reformed Palestinian Authority. Now, importantly here as well, Israel has ruled out any future role for the Palestinian Authority, which of course at the moment governs parts of the occupied West Bank. When it comes to Hamas's position on its weapons, what it has been saying is that it will not disarm until there is the creation of an independent Palestinian state, and that is very problematic for the Arab countries that want to see this reconstruction going ahead. It's very problematic when it comes to shoring up the current ceasefire, which is looking so wobbly at present.
Yeah, just very quickly, Yolande, Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, incoming later this week?
That's correct. And really, all parties looking to him to see if he can achieve some kind of breakthrough. He has talked about coming here ready to get an extension of the current ceasefire, which is what Israel is now really pushing for, saying it wants the return of the remaining, what's believed to be 24 surviving hostages from Gaza in exchange for this continuing period of phase one. But we've got Hamas rejecting that, saying it wants to move on. It wants a full end to the war, a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza.
Ukraine's armed forces have spent 3 years learning how to wage a modern drone war. And the country's top drone commander says it's the kind of combat the armies of NATO are not yet prepared to fight and need to be.
From what I see and hear, not a single NATO army is ready to resist the cascade of drones now.
Colonel Vadim Sukharevsky says Ukrainians have watched drone warfare advance in leaps and bounds. Over the course of 3 years since Russian forces invaded, Ukrainians have been forced to learn both how to use drones to counter Russia's overwhelming advantage in manpower and how to confront barrages of so-called suicide drones carrying explosive warheads launched at their cities and critical infrastructure. In an uneven fight, Ukrainian forces have used drones to pinpoint enemy positions and foil their ambushes.
If it had not been for drones, everything would have been a lot worse. Drones are the tool which gives us an asymmetrical response. The enemy is larger, stronger, and on the attack, and he doesn't value his soldiers' lives.
But Russia's use of drone warfare has shown just how difficult it can be to stop an enemy with an armada of cheap and deadly unmanned aircraft. Russia has deployed variants of the long-range Iranian-designed Shahed drone, which carries an explosive warhead. A Shahed can cost tens of thousands of dollars, but an interceptor missile to shoot one down can cost 10 times that.
It's just elementary mathematics. How much does a missile that shoots down a Shahed cost? How much does a Shahed cost? How much does it cost to deploy a ship, a plane, and an air defense system to fire at it? A Shahed drone is not a solution for all difficulties. It's not a dogma. There will be tens or hundreds of such drones, and it will develop because of this war.
Russian attacks on Ukraine, often numbering more than 100 drones, have become a regular occurrence. On Wednesday, residents of the city of Odessa were bombarded by a Russian drone attack. One woman who gave only her first name said more and more of the drones were getting through the air defenses.
In the beginning of the war, more drones were being shot down. It has been scary, but we felt like we were protected. Now they're falling on our heads like flies. They exploded around the house. Our house was completely blown out. One of the Shaheds hit the house directly.
Colonel Sukharevsky's warnings come as some NATO members in Europe ramp up defense spending to prepare for war, should the Ukraine conflict drag on or escalate. With U.S. support for Ukraine and Europe wavering, those efforts have intensified.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
This was President Donald Trump's moment to boast.
America is back. We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started.
He praised all the domestic actions he has taken so far on immigration.
And I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country.
And spending cuts.
We are draining the swamp. It's very simple. And the days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over.
He spent a long time praising his close ally, the unelected tech billionaire Elon Musk.
Thank you, Elon. He's working very hard. He didn't need this. He didn't need this. Thank you very much.
Who he's appointed to reduce government spending and boost the US's space ambitions. In a key moment, Donald Trump reached out to Ukraine's President Zelensky after days of criticizing him.
Today I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer.
It's after Mr. Zelensky made a statement saying he wanted to move forward.
We've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Mr. Trump also repeated his trade war threat.
If you don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one.
President Trump looks and sounds like he did in his first term, but this time he's more experienced and emboldened. This speech really underlines just the blitz of action he's taken since his return to the White House. He's really testing the boundaries of his power and creating confusion, leaving Democrats unsure how to react.
Many of them brought signs. Some said nothing as he taunted them. One Democrat was kicked out after heckling. President Trump arrived here as polls suggest Americans are split on the start of his second term. He can't run again, giving him 4 years to deliver on those big, bold promises.
The golden age of America has only just begun.
Nomi Iqbal, BBC News, Washington.
So how have Republicans been reacting to President Trump's speech? That's a question I put to our Washington correspondent, Tom Bateman, who is on Capitol Hill assessing the reaction.
I think, the energy you saw there was telling of, as you say, publicly how the Republican Party has, completely transformed itself into the way in which it offers support to Mr. Trump and his agenda. And I thought it was particularly striking just the sort of how visually you could see how divided the Congress is, with the Republicans basically on their feet throughout this and Democrats who are being chided by the president, stony-faced, silent, and Al Green, Democrat, getting escorted out by the Sergeant-at-Arms. To answer the question about Republicans, I think one of the most interesting moments was on tariffs, because, there are very senior Republicans who are very concerned, seriously concerned about the long-term impact of these tariffs if they stay in place. Now, it's notable that although some of President Trump's most loyal backers were on their feet cheering in applause when he talked about continuing tariffs and even applying more when it comes to April, there were some that weren't giving such vociferous support. And I think behind the scenes, that concern will continue. We've heard some senior Republicans talk about their to explain this away basically as a negotiation strategy, a way of putting pressure on Canada and Mexico and others to try and get what President Trump wants in other areas, notably border security, as he puts it. But I think their hope is really that this won't continue to see a slide on the markets, that this won't continue to see the dollar losing value, and that this will be a sort of short-term negotiation strategy by the president.
Justin Trudeau is promising some massive retaliatory tariffs in response to the levies that were imposed this week, Tom. What did you make of his speech last night? I thought it was interesting that he spoke directly to the American people in a way that previous American leaders have spoken to people in autocratic countries.
Yeah, it was really interesting that, although he sort of praised the president saying you're a smart guy, but this is a dumb thing to do. I mean, it was an extremely striking statement, I thought, by Mr. Trudeau, who I think has basically been pushed into a corner on the way he feels he has to respond to this, because they sort of tried the diplomatic tack. He even made the point that they did a new deal with President Trump during his first term when it came to trade. And yet here they are again basically facing this very severe punitive measure in the form of a 25% tariff. So, this is a strategy that world leaders take basically at their peril, which is to call out Mr. Trump, particularly to his own public. And look what happened to Volodymyr Zelensky last week when he tried to argue his corner in the Oval Office. He was humiliated by the Trump administration. He was called ungrateful and disrespectful. And look where that has left his country diplomatically, being arm-twisted, intense pressure by President Trump now to do what Mr. Trump wants. So, it was no surprise that I think shortly after Justin Trudeau's speech, we saw President Trump basically saying, well, there'll be more reciprocal reciprocal tariffs on Canada. So far, it hasn't had the impact Mr. Trudeau wants, but I guess his position would be he's left with little else to argue.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
St. Kitts Nevis national security officials emphasize that youth voice is critical to shaping policies to address delinquent behaviors. CRFM delegation pleased with the efforts made to enhance St. Kitts and Nevis's marine sector.
ECCB economist Kevin Woods discusses effects of inflation on region. Guyana sends protest letter to Venezuela on military incursion. Legal battle over St. Lucia's citizenship by investment program. Internationally, U.S. and Israel reject Arab alternative to Donald Trump's Gaza plan. Thank you for listening.